I think you're amazing.
You are too, Henry.
Thank you so much. Well, Perry, you are awesome.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, and I appreciate you what you're doing too, buddy.
Well, thank you. Because if you allow the world to define you, if you allow friends to define you, if you allow your spouse to define you, or anybody to define you outside of how God sees you, that does open the door to rejection. God bless you. I hope y'all have an amazing day.
Thank you, Brother Henry.
Thank you.
God bless you too. Thank you for having us.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Catherine Toon, and welcome to the Brother Henry and You show. Brother Henry has graciously asked me to co-host, and I'm so happy to do it. But I've got some really cool stuff for you that I think is going to help you. We struggle in life because it seems like it's a constant moving target. Even if you track through your life, you're like, wow, if things change, it seems like the change is changing. And that change seems to be a constant. And that's actually true. And the world is changing, everything is, when you try to track anything, it just seems, wow. And sometimes it can be really scary. And then on top of that, we have our personal lives and, our bodies are changing, we're aging, like, what the heck is that? Relationships are changing. What we're called to do is changing. What that looks like is changing. The people that we are traveling through life with, the relationships change, what that looks like. There's a lot of change. I think you got it. I don't think you need me to highlight that anymore. But there's a way that we can embrace change, because change actually shows that there's a life going on. There's something going on. Now, let's be very clear. Not all change is good. Okay. That's why I get, when there have been sort of political campaigns in the past, and not just one particular party, but many, they talk about change, and that's good. But, my question is, what change are we talking about? Because if we're in the frying pan, jumping into the fire is change, but that's not necessarily a good thing. So let's talk about change. Let's talk about how to embrace change and embracing the season that you're in. That's kind of the name of this series. It's going to be a two-parter. And we're going to talk about embracing the season you're in and the constancy of change and not freaking out, because change can actually be really good. How many of you have got stuff you want to change? Absolutely. So change can be really good. Change that is authored by God is always good. It's not comfortable. A lot of times it's really uncomfortable. But how many of you know how many of you know that when we seek comfort as the highest thing, we end up dwindling, because we were actually called to be stretched and to grow. And how many of you know stretching's not fun? But growing is fun. And the fruit of being stretched in ways we need to be stretched is actually really life-giving and really good. That's what we need to embrace. There you go. We've got to the high point on this part one. Next part two, we're actually going to be talking about in embracing the season and embracing change. We also can withstand that, the scariness of it, right? The potential threats in it, or perceived threats that may not be threats, or maybe some real threats. All of that. How do we do that? Well, we also embrace the constancy of God in the midst of change. So we're going to talk about both. So I'm not here just to, point out the problem and then, okay, have fun with that. We're all depressed now. That's a pet peeve of mine, that we talk about the problem ad nauseum, but we don't talk about how to weather it. But in this part one, I'm also going to be alluding to ways that we weather it and embrace it as something life-giving. The truth is you're either green and growing or red and rotting, right? And so when we become stagnant and rigid, we're not doing good. We're not thriving, right? There's not life in us. We become crusty and, I don't know, stale. right? There's no vivaciousness, no life there, because life, just from a biological, perspective, is that if there's stuff changing and happening, that's a living organism. When nothing is changing and happening, that's a dead organism. Okay, so we are called to bear life, and to bear life more abundant to the full till it overflows. So that actually will require of us change. Because let me help you. The mindset that you're operating at now is producing the results that you're seeing now. And for me too, a level playing ground. So what is God constantly trying to do? He's constantly trying to confront our mindsets that are limiting, our mindsets that are destructive, our mindsets that are sinful, our mindsets that cause us to operate in our lives at a level and a frequency we were never called to operate at. You always start where you're at. So we don't need to go before God and try to like show our best selves or whatever. We're not here to look good. Okay. We're here to actually be authentic. And in our authenticness, as we're changing and growing, we're automatically going to look good, because ultimately change is going to be you being conformed into the image of Christ. And you being conformed into the image of Christ is gorgeous in your flavor. Okay. But that will require change, and it will require grappling with things that are not fun to grapple, but you either have the not fun of grappling, or the not fun of being stuck, being trapped, turning into something that you never wanted to be, all of that. So you know what? The former, I vote for the former, and you should too. You'll either have the pain of change or the pain of staying the same. And the pain of staying the same is always more costly than the pain of change. Now, happily in that, this is good news in that, is that God doesn't throw it at you all at once, right? He's not like, all right, get your crap together all at once. Well, we couldn't handle, like, if God like unveiled everything that we needed to do, we would be crushed. Okay. But if he gives us the next bit and the next bit and the next bit, yeah, we can do that. It may be a big stretch. It may be hard, but you know what? Chances are the hardness that you're feeling of being operating at the level that you have, that's hard. So you can choose the hard of, okay, God, what's the program? What are we doing? Okay, yeah. And that requires you to really seek the Lord. Like, we get in trouble with our own bright ideas. Ask me how I know. Like, because I used to be a member of the program of the month club to help Catherine, redeem Catherine, bring Catherine up higher, whether it's a eating exercise regimen or I'm going to be conformed into the image of Christ according to my bright idea, all of that. And it really got me in a place of toil, because when we try to do things apart from God, there is no grace on it. There is grind. So where you're grinding, there's not a grace. You can pretty much quote that. Okay. I mean, not everything that God asks us to do is easy, but there is a grace to do hard things. And sometimes we really do need to push like champions through the limitations of our own mindsets, our own patterns, our own ways of being that are not of God. Yeah, we're going to have to push through those. We're going to have to, when there's a lie, that we really feel like that is so feeling true, that right there, and a lot of times it's like, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough, or whatever the lie is. Okay, that's not what God is saying. So which means whatever God is saying, that's what we need to agree with. And we're going to have to push up against those parts of us that are saying, yeah, no, I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. I'm not beautiful. I'm not powerful. I'm not blah, 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 blah. All the stupid lies, right? And so let's talk about that. I want to back up just a second. I want to go to Ecclesiastes 3. This is in the new international, this is a new revised standard updated edition. Wow. Okay. Just so you know. All right. For everything, there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal. Okay. So this is not to kill people. Okay. All right. But there are things in us that need to die. That are things that are not who we are. So I just want to place context in that. A time to break down and a time to build up. Yeah, if there's systems in you that are destructive, those puppies need to be broken down and the healthy ones need to be built up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Okay, but love one another. Okay, let me just help you with that. A time for war and a time for peace. So we're not like called to war against one another, but we are called to war against evil things, principality, powers, right? Constructs in our minds, injustice. Yeah. Oh, well, that's a war. Yeah. War against poverty, war against racism, war against sexism, war against these things, but love people. Okay. Let me just help you with that. So, and so let me just ask you, who gets to decide what time it is, what season it is? Well, you know, if you're tracking with God, or even if you're not, God is the one that really knows. God, what are we doing? What's the program? What season is it? Is it a time to plant or is it time to pluck up? Right? Is it a time to break down or a time to build up? And sometimes there's multiple things. But you know, this requires intimacy because God knows what time it is in your life. What are you needing? So, and sometimes what happens is we've been in a season where it's all been, let me just give an example that I can think of. Jesus, give me an example that I can think of. Sort of like we've been in a season of, let's say, an intense, like maybe ownership of sinful ways of being. Like God has kind of like, because the bottom line is we need to be truth tellers, right? And we need to not lie to ourselves and we need not to lie to other people. And so maybe God is confronting some sinful patterns and sinful ways of being. It's not who you are. You don't have a sin nature, but you do have sinful patterns and sinful ways of being like I do. When I'm fully conformed to the image of Christ, I will come find you. But so we're all in process. Yeah. And we need to be okay with the process. Okay. But sometimes there's a time that we really need to, that is really, and it's worse than I knew. We need to be confronted. Okay. Now, this is not to condemn you. There's no condemnation in Christ. That's not allowed. But it is to convict you. Why? Because these sinful patterns and sinful ways of being are harming you and harming one another. Yeah, they're not good for you. They are violating love towards yourself or towards other people. So God, at some point, he's going to throw a spotlight and say, yeah, Catherine, that insecurity you got going on, yeah, that puppy's got to go. Like, okay. And then he's like, I want you to look at the insecurity. I'm like, okay. Ugly, 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 ugly. I've been self-protecting. I've been self-promoting. I've been fluffing and buffing. I've been doing all these things. Ugly, ugly. Okay. That's not fun, but it's necessary. I got to know what I'm up against, because if he's pointing it out in convicting you, he's convicting you because he's saying, baby, that's not worthy of you. That puppy needs to go. Right? Well, how do we know? And I need to cooperate with God. He's not going to wave a magic wand, or he's not going to force me to relinquish it. He doesn't force, he doesn't control people. Okay. But he will move me and weigh on me to partner with him to, number one, agree that that's a problem. So let's say this sinful way of being is insecurity. Okay. That is a sinful way of being, by the way. because it's saying that somehow God just really, I don't know, he was great with everyone else, but when it came to me, like, yeah, he must have messed up. Well, that is actually accusing God. Okay, it is. And it's also a pain in the butt for everybody else. And then and that in that insecurity, say that's the issue, and that has been an issue with me in the past, which is why I chose it. It's created all sorts of self-promotion and fluffing and buffing, or maybe false humility, or just a lot of pain, or maybe drawing back when I need to pull forward, maybe not speaking up when I need to speak, not being bold when I need to be bold, whatever that is. And it's created a lot of inner torment, right? And so with that, I used to be like a poster child for insecurity. Not like I'm the only one, so I'm not, saying that, but I'm saying it was a really big deal. And I got it honestly. So he's pointing in that season, he's pointing to the insecurity, and there's a season to look at it and be like, yuck. But the reason you can look at it is because truly with how God made you, he didn't make you like that. He didn't make people insecure. He made them bold. The righteous are as bold as a lion, baby. Okay. All right. But if I'm identifying with this insecure thing, I'm not going to be bold. I'm going to be wimpy. I'm going to be wussy. And, I remember one time I had a speaking engagement, and I was so triggered during that engagement. I just really did crappy. And the person that had invited me goes like, what happened to Catherine? What was going on? And I'm like, well, I was massively triggered and in this really insecure place, right? Happily nobody died, so that's good. But I learned and that came up in order to be healed. So that's a season of looking to the thing that needs to be healed in me. Okay, so that's the season. And then you start embracing a season of, okay, so we focused on the problem. Houston, we have a problem. Now we're shifting into a season of, okay, so what are we doing about the problem? And so, for me, God had to number one point out where this is operating in all the ways it was manifesting, and then say, okay, baby, all right, I'm going to have you renew your mind. And there was a lot of different things with that. That was a season. It was mind renewal. Now we're tearing down, but now we're also building up and replacing it with the truth. And he would tell me, Catherine, do you know how perfect you are? And you're like, sort of, right? And he kept on doing it until I was like, yeah, of course I got to be perfect in you. I understand it's not a perfect manifestation, but how did he make you imperfect? So who are you relating to? So I said, okay, I'm just going to relate with the Catherine that was made in the image and likeness of God, without spot or blemish, made in love, chosen, joined to Christ before the foundation of the world in love. I'm going to start to relate to her more and more. You know what happened? Oh my God, it freed me up so that I could do stuff. Because if I'm focusing on how am I coming across, what do I look like? That is not a blessing to you. That is a big, gigantic pain in the butt. Okay. So I had to deal with that. And, he kept on me, kept in that way. Catherine, oh my God, multiple, wake me up in the morning. Catherine, you know how perfect you are. Okay. I guess you're telling me this again because I haven't gotten it yet. But how do you think we learn things? How do you think we unlearn things? So my question is to you, are you in a season of unlearning? Are you in a season of relearning? And sometimes those coincide at the same time. So let me see here. Okay. So the constancy of change really is a constant, but to embrace change, go to God and see, God, are you the author of this change? Are you the author? Are you asking me to change? Now, tragedies happen. That's a change. Okay, that didn't come from God. Let me just help you. Did not. God doesn't come to steal, kill, and destroy. He is not the author of death. Death is the enemy of God. Death happens. Stuff happens. Tragedy happens. Destruction happens. We live in a fallen world. And we're with people who have fallen mindsets and fallen ways of being, who make fallen choices that violate love, that create destruction. And this is what we're born into. And we've all played a part. And if we haven't played a part, it's probably going to be after that delusional part of you who thinks you haven't played a part. Okay. Still loved, but yeah, that thing's got to go. Why? Because you're way too lovely and precious and holy to let you be less than who you are. Yeah. So go to God and ask him, okay, God, is this from you? Is this change from you? You know, some things are just a part of life. Like, you know, aging, you know, and I'm a big believer in renewing your youth like the Eagles. I vote for it. I do what I can. But aging is a thing. Death is a thing. It is. And so, you know, you're going through stages of life. Your children may be growing up. Your vocation or your avocation, your whatever ministry you are in, whatever realm that is changing. The people that you're tracking with, it changes. Some people are called to go for you so far, and then you're called to release them. That's always painful, right? But if you're obedient to God, they need to be released. Or maybe it's someone you're supposed to hang with, but how that hanging is happening looks different, right? And this is all change. And so we have to ask God, is this you or is this something else? Okay. And then if it's him, or, you know, or if it's something that's just part of just life in general, then we can say, yes, I can embrace that. How can I embrace that well? Okay, because this is making me uncomfortable. I'm feeling stretched. What am I afraid of in the change? That's a good question. Jesus, that was good. You just brought that up right there. You're so amazing. What am I afraid of in the change, right? And well, I'm afraid I'm going to lose so-and-so. I'm afraid I'm not going to be loved. I'm afraid I'm going to be laughed at. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my money. I'm afraid I'm going to be kicked out on the street. I'm afraid of getting abused. I'm afraid of opening up to a new relationship. I'm afraid of whether we had all sorts of fears. Okay. And letting the Lord, and then having a minister, well, Jesus, if you're leading this thing that I'm afraid of, I'm afraid I'll get hurt again. Big one, right? Jesus, what do you want me to know? Oh, okay. So that is a risk, but this is how I can mitigate the risk. This is how I can take the risk, but not like implode in the risk, right? Not have, you know, the fallout from the risk, right? And so engaging with God in that, is this you? Okay, if it's you, oh my God, that freaks me out. What am I afraid of? And there may be multiple fears, and going to God blow by blow by blow and saying, okay, well, with that fear, okay, but I'm still feeling afraid. Okay, well, what's the fear behind the fear? What's an additional fear? And just going before God. Okay, so Jesus, what do you want me to know? Because I'm telling you, perfect love, baby, will cast out fear. Perfect love. Who's perfect love? That's God. Of course he is. All right. Why does he cast out fear? Because fear has torment. And he doesn't want you tormented. Right? So this is where you can be righteous and bold as a lion, because you've kind of dealt with some of those fears and you're tracking with God. And if God be for me, who can be against me? If God is for you, baby, who can be against you? Right? So all of that. And this is how you're able to move forward and embrace the next thing. Because every time you kowtow to fear, every time you bow down to fear, you become a smaller version of yourself. It's like fear is Lord. You're bowing down to that and you shrink, not in ultimately who you are, but in what you're manifesting. You're a smaller version of yourself. Okay. So shake it off, baby. Connect with God. Let him help you. Let him heal you and all of that. Chances are you're afraid because you've been hurt. Okay. So let's do some healing. Let's get in there. Let's have the Lord help us heal and resist fear, because fear is not supposed to be Lord. So sometimes he asks you to do things and you're kind of fearful. Well, do it afraid. Yeah. How do you think you're going to stretch? Because when you say, okay, I'm not going to let fear be Lord here. I'm really kind of nervous and whatever, but I'm not going to let fear be Lord here. So he's leading you. Okay, so God, this is you. So this is you and me. I'm doing something new. I'm doing something I never did before. I may fall flat down on my face, whatever. You could, but that doesn't change you're being loved, right? But you're stretching and you're growing and you come out the other side and you're a larger version of yourself. You've now been conformed to one other level of glory. So that change is the change to embrace and run with it. And it can be exhilarating. Why? Because you're growing. You're taking risks. It's like, I didn't think I could do that. Awesome. right? So, Brian and I like to scuba dive, and we really do. But I have to say, every single time I'm going into that water, I'm like, because I don't like sharks. I don't like sharks. I mean, like, bless them, but you stay in your range, okay? I watched Jaws when I was, young, and I mean, ever since kind of the getting into the water, and I have to talk to myself. I have to control my breathing. I'm talking to myself. Why? And I do, and I go, and it's amazing. And I'm so glad I did. And if I didn't, I would be the smaller version of me. We really do need to face our fears, but not be reckless, but face our fears with the one who is love that casts them out, that will bring you through on the other side. So I think I'll be winding down for embracing the constancy of change, things you have control over. You don't have control over world governments and what's going to happen to the dollar or the whatever currency that you have, or, these global things. You have a say, you have a part, do whatever the Lord is leading, but you do have control over you. And when you're operating in that sphere, okay, you're able to be powerful, and then you're able to address those things, and however you're called to address them as you're releasing what you're supposed to be releasing, the manifestation of the sons of God, release creation from its bondage. So let's keep on manifesting, but it will take work, constant work, but it's worth it. And that's worth embracing. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you, Henry, for letting me be on. Love you guys. Hey, tune in for part 2. We're going to be talking about the constancy of God. This will help you in a freako changing world. Okay. Love you.
Well, Perry, you are awesome.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing too, buddy.
Well, thank you. Because if you allow the world to define you, if you allow friends to define you, if you allow your spouse to define you, or anybody to define you outside of how God sees you, that does open the door to rejection. God bless you. I hope y'all have an amazing day.
Thank you, Brother Henry.
Thank you.
God bless you too. Thank you for having us.